Hey everybody, welcome to the Star Wars Canon Cantina, a show where we try to answer the question, who is Luke Skywalker, before the release of Star Wars Episode 9. How you doing everybody? My name is Mike. I am here with my co-host in crime, Jesse. How you doing, bud?
I am doing great, Mike, and I'm excited about our topic today.
That's right. So the whole purpose of the Canon Cantina podcast is to explore Luke Skywalker as a character, starting from A New Hope, going forward through both the current canon and Legends timelines. And today we've landed on the events between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. We are talking about the ambitious 1990s project of Shadows of the Empire.
That's right, Mike. So, Shadows of the Empire was a huge multimedia project in '96 when it launched. So, let's talk about a couple of the things before we get into actually the story and things like that. So, when we say multimedia project, we mean Shadows of the Empire was this huge initiative from people at Lucasfilm, and it was a EU book, which is now Legends book, a Nintendo 64 video game, a big budget video game at that at the time,
Yeah.
a a comic, a mini comic actually that they did in Nintendo Power, which there you go. A
In
soundtrack.
addition to the 6 issue limited
Yes.
run.
Right. And then we had a soundtrack which was unbelievable, which was almost unheard of at the time, a soundtrack to complement your reading experience, whether it was a comic or the book, preferably the book. And they actually had it was broken up by chapters and whatnot, elements of the story. This is a lot of things, Mike. This is a lot of
Yeah,
things.
there's a lot of ground to cover. So, in preparation for this episode, I didn't have time to go back and consume everything. But Jesse and I are both children of the Nintendo 64 age, so we, played our original carts of Shadows of the Empire till they wouldn't work anymore. So, I watched a refresher of the Nintendo 64 game. I did read the full 6 issue comics run, and I read the summary of the novel from wikisummaries.org, which was actually pretty good.
Very good. Well, we did back in '96 consume all this content, so it's fun to revisit this. I listened to the audiobook, which I had actually never done. I'd always read the book and the comic and played the game. Never listened to the audiobook. Fairly good audiobook. Good for most audiobook standards. Not quite up to par for Star Wars audiobook standards, at least the modern audiobooks. And I also watched a Nintendo 64 summary. I also rewatched that classic IG-8 boss battle
Oh yeah,
in its
yeah.
entirety because I had to. And I also read a Wikipedia summary and some YouTube as well. So, and the audiobook covers most of the story, but I will preface and say the audiobook does not cover the entire novel, as in it is a abridged audiobook, which was another way of them getting people quicker into the storyline. I would say the audiobook's probably about half the length of the actual novel, so that's worth mentioning as well.
Okay.
But it covers all the major plot points and, you know, dramatically more than the comic. So, but let's get into these different sources real quick, Mike.
Yeah. So one thing I just do want to cover, since we're still early on in the show, as we progress through the Star Wars timeline, if there are current Disney canon materials and Legends materials that happen at approximately the same time, we'll try to address them in the same episode. But looking at the current Disney canon, there's not a whole lot of canon material that happens between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi that involves Luke. Right now, all we really have is a YA novel, Moving Target, a Princess Leia adventure. There's an episode of the great YouTube series Forces of Destiny called Bounty Hunted, about how Leia gets the bounty hunter disguise. But neither of those really involve Luke, so we're not going to talk about them here.
And are those new canon, Mike? As in, is that, namely, is the Forces of Destiny, like Leia getting the bounty hunter costume, is that the new canon for that?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I've also heard some interesting, I think some of this is conspiracy, whatnot, things like that. But I've also heard that Shadows of the Empire is one of the least refuted EU things, as in Disney hasn't come out and said a lot of the stuff, but a lot is inferred in Return of the Jedi and other things like that, and other novels around this time of the new series. So it seems like they might pull what they like from this and kind
Similar
of
to
stick
how
to it.
they've pulled Thrawn out of his old books and put him
Right.
into Star Wars Rebels and everything and given him a new novel series. I could see
Sure.
that happening to some aspects of Shadows of the Empire. But like I said, those are the only two current canon sources between episodes 5 and 6. So it's just sort of left unexplored in the current canon right now.
Right. So one can hope and interested to see what they do with it.
Ever since Luke disappeared, people have been looking for him.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
A lot of rumors, stories.
And I became a legend.
People that knew him best.
Luke.
Luke, trust me.
Young Skywalker.
It's all true. All of it.
Before we get into these different sources of multimedia, this giant story, we're going to refresh you guys on the questions we look at in every arc. So the questions we're going to ask as we proceed through this is, what state is Luke in at the beginning of this story? How do the events of the story impact his development as a character? And would Luke's experiences in Shadows of the Empire make him different than the Luke we meet in The Last Jedi? Future Luke.
That's right. That last question varies a little bit based on if it's current canon or Legends, but we're going with the Legends version today. So
Right.
I think it's pretty safe to say that at the start of Shadows of the Empire, even before we get to its unique at the time opening crawl, Luke is a little down.
He's very down.
He's just found out that the most evil man in the galaxy is his father, and then his father proceeded to cut his hand off.
Yeah, there's some sort of line in the novel when we first run into Luke. It infers that Luke's been at Obi-Wan's hut for some time, meditating, learning, kind of just spending time there, reflecting. Also procuring Ben's journals and manuals and looking at those. But there's an interesting line that I wrote down here, Mike, where Luke talks about this is an inner dialogue he's having with himself, where he has equal parts shock and rage, which I find very interesting.
Well,
At this realization about Vader.
I want to back up. So you're talking to the novel. Does it open in Ben's hut? Because the comic opens with a crawl and just picks up on the redemption at the end of episode 5.
Actually, no. The book opens up with the bad guy trio: Shizor, Palpatine, and Vader, and kind of establishes the presence of Shizor and Palpatine's involvement with him for some time, and Vader's kind of hatred of him.
Well, to go with our opening, I do want to go through the opening crawl that was given to Shadows of the Empire. And I'll do my best. I forget his name, but the guy who read the little crawl for each Clone Wars episode.
Tom Kane.
Tom Kane, yeah. Ultimate victory lies within the grasp of the dreaded Galactic Emperor Palpatine as the tattered remnants of the rebel fleet desperately seek sanctuary and time to muster new allies. A grim Luke Skywalker, reeling from Darth Vader's revelation on the cloud city of Bespin, ponders his own destiny and that of the Rebel Alliance. Meanwhile, the search ensues for Han Solo, captive of the notorious bounty hunter Boba Fett. To deal a final blow to the rebellion, Palpatine has hatched a new plan of which even Lord Vader is unaware. To aid him, the Emperor has enlisted the services of the vast criminal underworld that lurks within the Shadows of the Empire.
Right. So cue the Coruscant stuff with Vader, Palpatine, Shizor here. But yeah, that's actually a great crawl, Mike. That's pretty Star Warsy.
And I would call that only a half bad Tom Kane impression.
Yeah. Can you do his Yoda? Let's
No,
save
I
that
can't.
for another time. He is the new Yoda for everything. So outside of the films. So we have a interesting interaction with Palpatine, Shizor, and Vader. So Shizor is a falling prince from the falling homeworld who is the Black Sun overlord, commander-in-chief, king, all that good stuff. And he has been for quite some time. And this is actually established in canon and non-canon via Clone Wars timelines when he was younger. So this is and
was
the Clone
Shizor
Wars-
was Shizor in the Clone Wars? I know that the Fallen were,
So they don't say him by name, but apparently
but-
he's one of those falling.
but it's pretty implied that it's him. It's been a while since I've watched Clone Wars, so I buy it.
Yeah, Maul doesn't kill him though.
Yeah.
So that's worth mentioning. But as Maul takes over, So that's kind of interesting. But Shizor has a very interesting history. I'll go over it real quick because it's relevant to the plot. His whole family was essentially killed by the Empire via Vader having secret laboratory type projects on the fallen planet where they were developing chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction. And there was a incident in the lab, ends up killing most of the population of Falling, but namely Shizor's entire family, his royal family. And so immediately he becomes the highest royalty, but he also has his hatreds.
Shouldn't he be King Shizor then?
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know. It might be some sort of I don't know, refuted royalty thing at this point.
He's still got to earn it, apparently.
Well, it doesn't really matter anymore because I think Falling's pretty much done for because of Vader's actions in this. And so in that happening to the Falling people, Vader orders the planet to be razed by the Imperial Navy and destroys most of the rest of the planet and the people. So Shizor has this intense hatred for Vader that I'm not sure Vader's fully aware of at that level. I know Vader's aware of it because they're pining for the Emperor's affections, but that's basically it.
Oh yeah,
so,
I don't think Shizor or Vader is aware of Shizor's
what he did.
intent. Yeah.
So this whole time, Shizor's plotting against Vader, and Shizor's ultimate goal is to become Palpatine's right-hand man and then eventually become Palpatine himself, as in take over and control all of Coruscant, mastermind all these sort of things.
As megalomaniacs do.
Yeah. And they make a very clear point in this book. It's not super clear early on, but it's clear by the end that Shizor is referred to as what you would call just a pure evil. And he appears like faux evil on the outside, but he's purely evil through and through. But what's interesting is they paint him as a charismatic sort of guy that's actually pure evil.
Shizor is just an awful character. He does not hold up 20 years later.
It's fine for you to think. I think he's a lot better in the book, and Mike and I were having a brief discussion about this before the show, just talking about how a lot of characters in the comic and game are not fleshed out at all, and that's a huge problem.
And that's, one of the drawbacks of such a big, ambitious project like Shadows of the Empire, to try to tell the same story through three different ways, three different medium. It's, there's some inconsistencies between the different versions. Some feel incomplete compared to the others. And just some things don't just hold up.
And I will say my interest in Shizor, I think, comes only from the novel because he's essentially one of the three or four perspectives in the novel. Characters, really. And that's Luke, Leia, Vader, and Shizor. That's really it. Everyone else is a side character. Lando has a very large part in this book, which is refreshing. But he's not we never get from Lando's perspective. We only get from Shizor's perspective, Luke's perspective, Leia's perspective, and Vader's perspective, and pivotal moments. And Vader's the least of those. So Shizor actually has a bigger part in this than probably Luke. Probably followed by Leia.
Absolutely.
Followed by Leia as the second biggest part. Then Luke's the third big. Luke and Vader are kind of tied as the third biggest part. So it's really interesting. And you're kind of seeing him. He's masterminded so many things till the end, and he gets so far. And he's been getting so far for a long time. So, but a quick intro to Shizor here before we move on to Luke's stuff is that Shizor says, "Every atom of my being is at your command." He's referencing Palpatine. And a Palpatine quote I put here, which I found interesting, is he says, "How pleasant it would be, Shizor, to believe that. But I am not such a fool. For one of your devious nature and high ambitions, to be totally loyal would be a miracle beyond the scope of Force itself. Even without the Force, I'd be able to see well enough into your heart. You are not so devoid of self-interest, Shizor, as you would have me believe. If you wish to see the Empire achieve its fated glory, which Shizor claims, for its dominion across the galaxy will be total, then such a desire is due in your own lust for glory and power, your tie and ambitions to the Empire, because you know that is the best way to achieve them." So Palpatine's basically like, I see through
pretty much your crap. That's all he needed to say.
Yeah. He's basically saying you're using the Empire as a tool for your gain, and I know that because I'm better than you at that. So it's really interesting. He's like a mini Palpatine, but very interesting. So
when we
then
actually
end up
join Luke, he's on Tatooine with Leia, right?
Right, like we mentioned, Ben's hut, and we kind of reference Luke's anger and rage and frustration and fear and confusion with the knowledge of Vader being his father. He tries to reach out to Ben, not really any response or anything like that about why didn't you tell me, that sort of thing.
But
Continuing that.
he ends up with one of Obi-Wan's journals and is using that to build his green lightsaber. Which
Exactly.
To me, regarding Luke, that's probably the most interesting thing added by Shadows of the Empire. Because in Return of the Jedi, he just has it and we're like, oh man, that's cool. But the creation of it, and there's a deleted scene from Return of the Jedi actually where he's doing this. I just think the origin of the green saber is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I've got a little fire to put on that because this is actually my favorite lightsaber. So, as many of you know, it's the same hilt as Obi-Wan's, same design, same shape, but the colors are slightly different, which is a nice touch. So, actually, the true story behind this non-EU is that in them making this, they weren't thinking, "Oh, let's make Luke's second saber like Obi-Wan's because they'll tie it thematically or whatever." No, I think really what happened was the saber that Mark used in the film was Alec Guinness's stunt saber from New Hope.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's just another example of happy accidents that look like planning that happened in the early days of Star Wars.
Right, and I'm sure someone said, "Hey, for Luke to build another lightsaber that has a tie to Obi-Wan would be cool, or to be look like Obi-Wan's or whatever." But really interesting. So it was Alex stunt saber in New Hope, the one that they had the film tape on that moved really fast to create the old lightsaber effect before they got digital actually drawing in of the lightsabers. So that's how it was formed, and it's always been my personal favorite lightsaber, Mike. I just got to mention that Luke's green saber. I just like where the top extends with the little small piece, the little cup. You know what I mean? It's real thin at the top, and then it has that real battered, and it looks really rough in a good way.
I think
So-
my favorite lightsaber is the Inquisitor Helisaber.
No, it's not.
I'm just kidding.
I like Dooku's saber too, but for different reasons. But I know the Legacy saber is the saber, the Anakin's saber. But I've always had an affinity for the green lightsaber, the blade, the look of it, the cup. It's bigger than the Legacy saber, so it has a more interesting look. But anyways, so that's Luke's doing that. So we also find out that Luke's hiding on Tatooine because he only has knowledge that Boba Fett will eventually deliver the package to Jabba the Hutt. So
That's right.
he's essentially keeping watch.
And Leia's with him, and she knows that Luke has changed between the events of Empire Strikes Back and now, and how he's acting, his demeanor, and just sort of his, kind of goals for what he's set out to do.
Right. And she makes it very clear, especially from her perspective, that he's keeping a lot of things close to the chest, and she won't really tell her all of it. You know what I mean? Really everything that transpired. So I think because he's kind of defeated. So
Yeah, so this is part of carryover from the ending of Empire Strikes Back. He's in a much more serious state. He's had his first ass kicking, and he realizes what exactly he's going up against.
Right. Also, I'm going to mention too, if I didn't mention this earlier, Mike, that they make it seem like quite a significant amount of time has passed. Not years or anything like that, but month or two at this point, as in they've kind of had some dead ends. Lando and Chewie are still out there looking for Han, but this is the best plan they've got. Lando and Chewie are following leads, and Luke's just basically camping out on Tatooine because he knows Han's carbonite body will eventually arrive at Jabba's palace, and he's basically meditating, training, reading Ben's journals, building this lightsaber, and just waiting.
So while Luke is doing all of this, I believe the first 4 levels of Shadows of the Empire, the video game, play out, because it starts at the Battle of Hoth.
Right.
And then you've got, maybe it's just the first 3. Is the hover train the second level?
That sounds
Second or third?
Third, I think.
Either way, Dash is following the bounty hunters, and he ends up chasing Boba Fett to Gal Dash Rendar, who is the worst Han impersonator that the 90s could produce. It's some fun levels. The very beginning of that game is like the first 4 levels is the best of the game. You got the Battle of Hoth,
right?
The memorable train battle. Then you get the jetpack, and you fight Slave One, And beyond that, the game's just pretty meh. But tracking Boba Fett on Gaul, to he finds him. Boba Fett gets away, but Dash knows he's in the Gaul system, and he relays that to Lando.
Right. So Dash is a friend of Lando's. He's a Han wannabe, as Mike says, or he's Han 2.0 is what they're trying to paint. And it seems like a weird way for them pigeoning in. It's like, oh, we lost a scoundrel smuggler character. Let's throw one in. A cowboy. We lost a cowboy. Let's throw a cowboy into the story.
Let's make a worse one.
Yeah. So, but it's like he has a better ship than Han.
It's true.
They say he's as good as a pilot as Han, maybe better. A lot of interesting things. So Lando speaks with Dash, and then Lando comes to Luke and Leia and says, "Hey, we've got a lead. I think we found Han on Gaul. Let's go." So then that leads us to back to stuff on Coruscant with Palpatine, Vader, and Shizor. More scheming. We're introduced to
Always
Shizor's
scheming. Shizor
Yeah.
is.
We're introduced to Shizor's personal assistant, bodyguard, girlfriend, everything.
Sex
person.
bot.
Sex bot.
It's
Guri.
what she is. I think the
Oh, yeah,
book,
that- The book makes
acknowledges
it
that.
clear.
Yeah,
The book makes it clear that like only a few times in Shizor's life he's ever not had the option with real people or something, and he's just like Guri. Yeah, so it's very odd.
That's gross. So can you give us the quick rundown of Shizor's overall scheme?
So his scheme is to thwart Vader, but not in a Sith way, more in a criminal, politician way. So his main scheme is to get in Palpatine's graces by showing Vader's faults, Vader's failures, and his goal is he knows that Vader wants Skywalker. So his goal is to become that person, capture Skywalker, present him to the Emperor, get in the Emperor's graces, shame Vader, work his way up in the Empire, and eventually, use the Empire for his own material gain and, power. What's really interesting about Shizor, they mention this a lot, and I think it's an interesting trope. They mention that he has excess money, wealth. He's a high fashion guy. He dresses nice, all this stuff, but he doesn't really care for wealth and things like that. He cares for it as a tool, but he doesn't care for it as a vanity. There's even some part early on where someone sends him a bribe through these rich jewels, and he literally throws them away because he says he has no purpose for them. As in, these don't serve me any purpose. I'm just throw them away, rather than someone else that has money and higher vanity. So for him, it's really all power.
Now, a couple questions. Doesn't he ultimately end up with the goal of killing Luke to embarrass Vader?
He does. And
just making sure
ahead,
I had that clear, because you read more of it than I did. And how does he figure
plan
out
changes
the
to that.
relationship? How does he figure out that Luke is Vader's son?
So one of the opening scenes of the book, the one I'm actually mentioning how the film opens, it's Vader and Palpatine's exchange from Empire. The exchange where the Executor pulls out of the asteroid field and Vader contacts the Emperor.
That's right. That's coming back to me now. He's standing off camera, basically, and he sees that conversation.
And it's not even like he's spying. Palpatine knew he was coming.
Yeah, he's just in the room.
Palpatine does not care. You know what I mean? That Shizor has that information because Palpatine is like, he's a great tool and a great ally, but I'm so much stronger than him and he can't hurt me, that sort of thing. It's almost Palpatine's hubris that leads to all these issues.
That's right. I knew it was not just hey, it's convenient that he figured that out, that there was a reason for it, but it's not made clear in the comics or the video game, which is the stuff I consume.
Isn't that unfortunate, right? So he learns, one, that Palpatine's end goal is to bring Skywalker in and make him, join them. He learns, two, that Skywalker is how Shizor refers to him the whole time. Luke, I don't even know if he knows his name's Luke to the end. So he calls him Skywalker and the boy. He learns that Skywalker is Vader's offspring through this. And he sees Vader
say everything.
Yeah. And because he's literally coming to meet Palpatine when this is happening. Palpatine has a meeting with him. They scheme. They do sort of things. And, this is classic Sith Lord stuff. I mean, how frustrating it is to be Vader and know Palpatine's doing stuff like that. But Vader doesn't even know half this stuff.
And that is something that has been brought forward into the new canon through the first Marvel comics run of the Darth Vader title, where he was being pitted against these other potential apprentices, which was pretty interesting.
But you're right, Mike. His goal is to capture Skywalker, present him to Palpatine. He has a lot of resources. He has bounty hunters. He has crime syndicates all under his control. He runs the entire Black Sun. But eventually, his plans starts unraveling later in the story, and he just switches it to, no, I'm just going to kill Skywalker because it's going to ruin Vader.
He's going to kill Skywalker and make it look like it was Vader's fault.
Right, exactly. And that Vader failed at it, and Skywalker also died. So another potential Dark Jedi is gone, because I'm going to call him Dark Jedi at this point, because Sith wasn't even really a thing other than Palpatine. And at this point in 1996, right? So, so that's the crux of the entire main plot, though, right there. That's the main plot, right, of the entire book.
Well, back to the story involving Luke. They get this information on Tatooine. They decide to go to the Gaul system, where Boba Fett has left the planet Gaul. He's gone to the moon Kyle. But just like Jesus in the Bible, I've got some red text of a Luke quote talking about Dash. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what Luke thinks about Dash?
So the second Luke meets Dash, Luke was thinking this guy was so full of himself that it was a wonder that he didn't explode and spew his ego all over the place. This is an internal thought Luke's having that he voices to Leia and Lando. And Lando's like, well, he's a great gambler. He's a great card player. He's a great flyer. He's a great smuggler.
So they don't go to the Gaul system alone. They bring Rogue Squadron with them.
Yeah. So Luke calls in a favor. He literally calls Wedge and he's like, what are you guys doing? And Wedge is like, we've been pretty quiet, Luke. We've had a couple run-ins with the Empire, but not much. Because they're basically hiding. So Luke's like, all right, you guys are bored. Come on. So, and at this point, which I find really interesting in the novel, they make it very clear through Luke's thoughts and his mind and stuff that he has given all the reins of Rogue Squadron fully over to Wedge.
Yeah.
Which is a cool point in the EU and the Legends and kind of the canon, really. I mean, a lot of this and the lightsaber are things that we can infer through the films, right?
I think it would be a bigger part of canon currently if Dennis Lawson had agreed to come back for The Force Awakens.
I know,
just like,
right?
nah, I'm done.
But we do get some quality Wedge stuff in the Aftermath series, which we'll get to later.
Yeah,
quite a bit of Wedge stuff.
So, although we got a ways to go before we get to that part
I know.
of the story.
Just hang on. So,
but there's the space battle over the moon, Kyle. It's not a bad battle, but it's a typical 90s Star Wars space battle. The unique danger.
Quick.
The unique danger comes at the end of the battle when Wes Jansen starts trying to kill Luke for some reason.
Right. So he's having a malfunctioning astromech. At this point, we don't know the astromech has been sabotaged or what's happening. But yeah, that's Wes Jansen. A couple pilots are killed as a result of all this. Luke avoids this attack.
Jansen.
Yeah, Luke avoids all this through actually the Force. He even hears Ben speak to him at this moment, which I wrote down as relevant.
Oh yeah, no, that's good because that's not brought up in the comics that Ben's talking to him. So this is another point of growth.
It's very minor. Yeah,
growth in the Force. He's using the Force to avoid enemy and friendly fire, but communing with Ben again, getting stronger in the Force. That is an important note that does show he doesn't just jump from one power level to another between the two movies.
Yeah, and as we've been led to believe, he's been reading and meditating and practicing for a month to 2 months now, in his isolation on Tatooine, which is really cool as well. It's very thematic with several of the Jedi Masters we've had before. So Luke survives this. Now, remind me, Mike, was this in the comic where Dash, his misstep here, or is that later with the Bothans?
I believe that's later. So during this X-Wing battle that Luke is part of with Rogue Squadron, Lando and Dash are trying to sneak onto the moon to find Boba Fett. And Dash is like, well, that's where he is. Bye. I don't get paid enough to actually do dangerous stuff.
Yeah, Dash is like, I'm not fighting an Imperial blockade. I'm just going to sneak around and do my informant job. So
he runs from the fight, but comes back after. So, real weak.
I've got that written here as, he abandons them on Gaul at this point. And this is something in reference in literature a lot, which is called adaptational heroism. So let's give it a definition here. So it says the flip side of adaptational villainy. So this is essentially what we just talked about. This is a huge part of Dash's character, um, where just opportunity, like
Huge part of Dash's character. That's an oxymoron.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, it's like he's like Han, but worse in the way of his
Yes,
personality.
I agree.
Of being a good guy. That makes sense. Like
He's
Han
not
feels
a good
drawn.
guy.
Exactly, Han feels drawn to it. Dash has moments where he sees there's moments for him to be a hero and help, and he takes those, and other times he just completely ignores it and walks all the way around it. So it's really interesting.
So
at this point,
adaptational heroism then is just a literary word slapped onto. He sometimes does the right thing when it's not too dangerous, or he's going to get paid enough.
yeah, and sometimes they use this to portray characters more sympathetically to match the values of an audience, things like that.
Right, but in terms of Dash, he's just not the good guy like Han is. He's the guy who will do the right thing as long as it's safe.
right, and Han has some of these adaptational heroism elements as well, but Han evolves to become a full blown hero, right? Protagonist.
I think even Han that we see in the
New
Solo
Hope.
film
Solo.
is too much of the good guy to, you know, duck out on a situation like this. He decides to stay on the planet at the end and help Enfys Nest. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Luke in Shadows of the Empire.
So they get through this battle. Luke survives through using the Force. They learn that Wes's droid was sabotaged, and this is another connection one of the first connections we have to Shizor's plot through the crime syndicates and the Black Sun's reach. So, refreshing Mike on the comic, what happens here on Gaul? Is there anything worth mentioning before Leia decides?
They don't stay on Gaul very long because they fail.
Yeah, right. So they fail. Boba Fett gets away. So at this point, Leia decides to contact underground organizations and find out who wants Luke dead. So why would this astromech try to kill Luke? Well, she tries to get in contact with the Black Sun, specifically Guri, through this. Guri's kind of the mouthpiece of the Black Sun. She's the gatekeeper in a lot of ways to Shizor and his higher ups, and she's one of the higher ups as well. But at this point, Luke's sent to go back to Tatooine, which is kind of funny.
We can render 3 planets in this video game. We have to stay on these 3 planets.
So he doesn't know that Shizor has this planned all along, that Shizor is following Boba Fett's progress and the bounty hunter's progress. And there's a little conflict there with Boba Fett encountering the other bounty hunters, by the way, which I guess is worth mentioning.
Not if we're focusing on Luke. It's not. Like,
No.
I don't even think they do a good job with the other bounty hunters. The comic doesn't stay consistent with their characters from other Legends material.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Zuckuss and Forlom. I don't think it does them any.
Oh no, they are the worst 2 of the bounty hunters.
So Luke goes back to Tatooine and he's finishing up his lightsaber. So at this point, the book goes into greater detail about how he had trouble finding the crystal and him kind of forming a synthetic crystal, which is kind of interesting, and him getting parts from all over the different cities. It's been taking him a lot of time to find all this. He starts testing out the lightsaber with R2, and then he hears the sound of swoop bikes. So he immediately a conflict ensues because Luke figures out they're coming to kill him, and they're a swoop bike gang of bounty hunters and mercenaries. So then we have a kind of pretty cool scene where it's like Luke's history as a teenager and child comes in to help him as an adult here. He kind of takes them on a ride through Beggar's Canyon and some other notable areas in Tatooine that he grew up around, and he knows it better than them. And there's a specific point in the novel where it mentions Luke knows there's a turn coming up that's one of the sharpest turns ever. He knows that in order to get past this turn, you have to almost completely brake and turn off the entire acceleration, which Luke does because he knows, but the other guys don't know. Several of them crash. Also, this echoes what we're going to see with Luke in Return of the Jedi with the speeder bike chase there.
Oh, yeah. But don't worry, because Dash is there to save the day. Thanks, Mary.
Unbeknownst to Luke, Leia has been having Dash actually watch over Luke. So after they failed at Gaul,
I feel like that should bother Luke more than it did.
Yeah, it does. Definitely more in the novel, but it's funny is Dash is like, all right, I'm done with my job. He's leaving Gaul, and Leia's like, no, 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 I'm gonna pay you money to watch Luke. And he's like, what? He's a grown man. Also, isn't he like a Jedi in training? And Leia's like, just watch him.
Yeah,
Here's
in
money.
training, he's not very good yet.
I know. Yeah, and the black sun's on him, right? So Dash was sent by Leia, and the gang belonged to Jabba. So very interesting now. Shizor has actually reached out to Jabba, which is referenced in the book. Shizor calls him, so, and they have a discussion about this. R2 detects now the approach of a courier droid. So after Luke and Dash have killed all these swoop gang members, we have a strange thing, a strange way to deliver the plot. But I guess, communication in Star Wars is weird sometimes. It's archaic.
Yes.
It's archaic, at best.
And this droid's just totally cool with the dead bodies everywhere. It's like, Tatooine, seen it all.
Yep. So basically, it's some political Bothans requesting to have a meeting with Leia because they know Leia's been on Tatooine with Luke for some time, and they realize she's not there. So at this point, we have I think a classic Luke moment where, first of all, he can't even open the courier until he says the password, which he tries several things. He tries Han first, and it's kind of a weird moment where it doesn't work, and Luke kind of almost like has some relief. And then he figures out that it's Alderaan is the password, and the droid opens up.
Well, that's another moment of character development or exploration that was left out of the comic, because I don't even think that this courier droid scene is in there at all. So
Dash is like, how do you know that? And Luke's like, I know Leia.
Yeah, it's just exhibiting his relationship with Leia, who he does not know is his sister at this point.
No. So it's a message from politicians on Bothawi.
It's from Manny Bothan.
Right. Mandy Bothan. That's good.
Yeah. Manny Bothan's died.
And Luke's like, let's go. And Dash is like, this is for Leia. And Luke's like, I can represent Leia. This is important. We need to go. And Dash is like, whatever, man. I'm getting paid to watch you.
Which is a nice turn, because Luke is acting just like his mother did in Attack of the Clones.
Very
Padme
nice.
is the one that takes them from Tatooine to Geonosis, and Anakin's like, I'll protect you, but I guess I have to go with you.
Yeah, I like it. So the Bothan accept them as Leia's representatives when they get there. And they explain to them about a new Imperial secret project, which is the Death Star 2. Essentially.
That's right. So this is attempting to tell the story of how the rebels get the plans or supercomputer core, just information about the new Death Star.
Right, and they're also making Dash more important because he's privy to this information. So they go on this mission. So let's talk about the mission. Tell us about the mission, Mike.
I don't know a whole lot about the mission because there's not a whole lot of detail given in the comic. So I was assuming there wasn't a whole lot of Luke development in there. But is that different in the novel?
Just an emotional space battle. A lot of confusion about. So the Empire's masquerading as a freighter on a transport. They're pretending to be civilians, but they're transporting explosives and information about this Death Star. And this is actually one of the parts of Dash's story I really like. They're met by Blue Squadron here, and
apparently Iman Azamine is there somewhere.
Yeah, he is. And they go on this mission. Luke and Koth discuss the supercomputer's significance while Dash blames himself on missing the missile. So what we have here...
That's right. It was Dash's fault that Manny Bothans died.
Yeah, so all these Bothans die because Dash could not stop this missile. And up to this point, he's been this cocky, arrogant guy. He's like, I can do anything in a ship. Nothing can stop me, all this stuff. And lots of civilians and military personnel die. And he actually starts feeling feelings, regret. I mean, all sorts of things. He's starting to become more of a Han Solo in the correct ways.
Don't compare him to Han. Dash is just so bad. This is like the only depth he's ever given.
Well, they're echoing Han's thing, so I mean, just got to mention it. You know what I mean?
They're echoing Han in the sense that somebody pirates a movie by recording it on their iPhone sitting in the theater. That's the Dash to Han transfer we're getting.
So you're saying Dash is like the Bollywood actor for Han or something? Like he's like the like.
I feel like that's a disservice to Bollywood by making that
Well,
comparison.
I like Bollywood. I've seen some of their Jedi stuff. It's like you know,
I guess I haven't seen any of the Jedi stuff.
yeah, it's not canon, but it's fun. It's you know,
I
it's
think
different. It's the
I
same.
think it's more like the knockoffs that you back when Blockbuster was a thing, the Transmorphers that came out at the same time as
Oh,
the
man.
Transformers that would try to trick Grandma into renting the wrong thing.
Man, so Luke and these Bothans work on the supercomputer. Then the bounty hunters show up.
Yeah, because Luke knows what he's doing with his supercomputer.
Yeah, so this is the Barabel bounty hunters. The book makes it out to be these guys are pretty strong warriors. They're fierce lizards. They're I think the first time they're established in the EU, Mike. I'm not sure.
I think that's right, but don't yell at us if we're wrong.
Yeah, they're a huge point in later books, especially when there's a Jedi female Barabel master later in the story that Luke has a strong relationship with. So this is kind of interesting. Luke ends up cutting off some of their arms. At this point, we have Luke's first instance of deflecting laser bolts, and he's not very good at it, but he's doing it fairly well. He's letting go, reaching out. He blocks a couple of bolts, gets to cover, which I find interesting as well. So I mentioned it here.
Yeah, no, that is important because it's showing, the increase in his force abilities that play out in Return of the Jedi.
Right, but Luke eventually gets captured and he's put in a cell. But then we have Luke's first instance of using the mind trick, and he's not great at it at first. He struggles with it for a while, but then it ends up working. He basically tells the card, unlock the door, come in here. You're feeling very tired and you just need to rest, and come in here, sleep on the bed, and just sleep the rest of the day away, essentially. And
So
he lets Luke
it took
out.
him a couple tries to make it work, you're saying?
Yeah, a lot. And let's
That
keep,
sounds familiar. I wonder
let's
who.
keep it.
Sorry,
To counterpoint,
we'll keep it here,
counterpoint
we'll
you
keep it
there,
here.
Mike. He has been months have passed at this point from Luke and his first mention of the Force. So
And Ray
do
had
have
been
that.
using the Force her whole life. She just didn't know it. But we're gonna
It's
save
true.
that for later.
It's true. That's a good discussion. So, at this point, Luke learns the information that there's two prices on his head. Vader wants him alive. Shizor wants him dead. This is when Shizor switched his whole scheme to just kill Skywalker. Let's just get this done. It'd be great if I could capture him first, then kill him and play this out. But either way, it's Luke figures this out.
The comic's not super clear on what exactly happens here. This is where we get to the worst part of the comic and novel, and we get to Shizor just being really, really problematic and rapey.
Well, the Falling, all their creepy stuff they do. So their pheromones.
Which has been thankfully toned down in subsequent books like the role-playing game source books, but there's having like natural pheromones, but he is so totally rapey with it. He's clearly abusing his
he
positions
manipulates
of power.
Yeah, but I think that's. I mean, I don't like that, but I also think
Obviously I'm not saying you like that, but it is a.
I think
it was a shocking, thing to read again after so long.
I think it's good in some ways though, because I don't think Vader would do this. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of how evil he is. Like I said earlier, he appears on the outside charming, wealthy, handsome, whatever, high fashion, all this stuff, but really on the inside, he's just as evil as Palpatine without the dark side.
Yeah, he needs to die. That's for sure.
Oh, it makes it very clear, and the book makes you feel for Vader because Vader cares for Luke in a weird way. Also wants to impress Palpatine, and Vader hates this guy. And Vader doesn't know that this guy hates him via the past, like we talked about. But so yeah, let's get to the the rapiness. I actually think this is a really good scene where we actually have Leia meet Guri with Chewbacca. At this point, Chewie is in the iconic bounty hunter gear.
The iconic Chewie mullet, you mean?
They make fun of it so much in the book. They just mention how many times it's a bad haircut. It's the worst haircut on a Wookiee. Yeah, Chewie has a flat top. He has a cybernetic eye. He has several weapons. He has several bandoliers with grenades and things on them. He's impersonating a famous Wookiee bounty hunter called Snuva, who no one's seen in a really long time. And Leia is impersonating Bausch, or um, another bounty hunter who is we're led to believe is deceased, but very few people know that. And that's where they get these costumes. That's why. And Chewie's not happy. So, but
Chewie's not happy. He interrupts the super awkward seduction, and they send a message to Luke, Lando, and Dash, even though Luke has already felt that Leia was in danger through the Force. So everybody's heading to.
I will
Coruscant
mention
now.
Leia resists him pretty well, and
Not in the comic. The comic really cheapens Leia.
Oh, now the book is really well written, because this is an interesting growth moment for Leia. It tells a lot of things about her character, and I think this is one of the things in the audiobook that they did not mess with the abridged element. They left it because it's so important to show how evil Shizor is and how manipulative he is. And Leia's like, I love Han. What's going on? You know what I mean? Like, and then it also makes it clear Leia's never. She basically says, "I've never done this with anyone ever. Like, hooked up with them immediately." She's like, "I do not want to know what's happening to me," and she starts using the Force in some ways, like not in a active way, but in a, like you said, looking, reaching for stuff.
I don't know
yeah.
if that's using the Force at that point. I think it's just
Yeah,
her strong will.
Yeah.
Does the book say it's her using the Force?
No, it just more like talks about her, something referencing her reaching out to Luke, like she does at the end of Empire.
Yeah. Well, and they have that connection, except this time it's Luke that feels Leia's in danger.
Right. But Leia makes it very clear that she doesn't really want any part of it. And but the more and more he's using these pheromones to manipulate her, so she doesn't know what's happening. So Chewbacca pulls her aside. He kind of snaps her out of it, so she gets to leave the room. They have this discussion. Chewie tells her that they're being watched, they're being recorded. Everything they're being done is probably just a trap for Luke. And she goes back in there. She feels the sensation again, the pheromones, but this time she herself resists Shizor. She groin kicks him, which is a classic movie thing. And he doesn't like that one bit. And he doesn't understand how she could be resisting him, because no woman has ever resisted him like this. Some have tried.
He's just so gross. I regret ever owning a Shizor action figure.
Shizor Cosby.
Whoa.
He's so charismatic on the outside, but behind the scenes, he's masterminding.
Well, now I wish that Shizor had that sweater on instead of his high galactic fashion.
Yeah, I know. So Chewie and Leia, Chewie says bye time, basically. And Chewie leaves, he runs, gets out of there to go get Luke and Lando and get Leia out of the situation.
So there's a rescue that happens that involves the droids flying the Falcon, and they get off the surface of Coruscant. I'm sort of speeding us through the end here because it's fairly, just kind of standard 90s Star Wars action.
There's a moment too where Luke and Lando knock out some stormtroopers and take their armor. That's before this Chewbacca thing happens.
Oh yeah.
And Luke actually uses the mind trick there as well. He just tells the stormtrooper, "Take your armor off and take a nap." So yeah,
which is also kind of weird.
And Lando's like, "Oh, I just knocked the guy out," and Luke's like, "Well, we didn't have to do that." So, but
well, they try and establish that the thermal detonator is a really big deal. They use it to blow up Shizor's palace. But we get to the space battle.
This is
Shizor's palace is destroyed. He flies up in the Virago, his Star Viper chasing him. He ends up on his Skyhook.
The Skyhook, yeah. This is kind of the final set piece, right?
For Shizor, it is.
For everyone, really. It's the climax of the story here. So you're right. That's a cool little escape thing with the Falcon and the Virago, which is an iconic looking ship chasing them. So then we have the battle at the Skyhook, where Shizor has a little miniature fleet, Black Sun fleet, and they're engaging the rebels. They're engaging Luke's forces. It looks kind of a little grim for the rebels because they're just kind of ragtag rogue squadron, just fighters and stuff in the Falcon. And then out of nowhere, which keep in mind, I'm going to reference this because this is in Rogue One, this is in Clone Wars, this is in several things. Vader pops out of light hyperspace right there. And this is what Anakin does several times in Clone Wars, which was a cool callback in Rogue One. Probably my favorite moment of all of Rogue One, actually, where the Devastator just pops out right in the middle of the Rebel fleet. And Vader does this to Shizor. And Shizor's basically like, "Oh, Vader, how's it going, man? Let's get Skywalker together." And Vader's like, "I know what you've been doing. I know you're going to kill Skywalker. I know you're trying to get into Palpatine's graces, and this is going to end right now because my fleet is here." And I wrote down a quote here. Caesar's like, "Oh, you wouldn't do anything to upset Palpatine because I'm one of Palpatine's greatest allies. I provide so many resources to you guys, all this stuff." And Vader says, "I will risk the Emperor's displeasure. However, you will not be there to see it."
Kaboom!
Yeah, the Star Destroyers bombard the Skyhook to death.
And the rebels are confused because they're freaking out. They see the Imperial fleet, but oh hey, they're shooting the other guys for once.
So they get out of there. Shizor dies, and in the explosion of the Skyhook, we see Dash die. The Outrider is exploded by the Skyhook falling on it. Similar circumstances in the game, except you're the one who destroys the Skyhook.
Yeah,
Through a reactor, sort of classic Star Wars reactor, blow something up from the inside out. So Dash dies, and actually Luke feels a pang of sadness, and he actually feels bad that he thought so low of Dash a long time ago, because basically as the story progresses, we didn't mention this with more of Dash's arc, but Dash becomes more and more heroic. He becomes more likable. He actually cares about the rebels, and he still regrets the Bothan thing, and he brings it up several times.
does he actually die in the novel? Because the comic makes it clear that he gets away.
So in the novel, he dies to everyone's knowledge, except then there's a prologue where we see that Dash
The
faked his own
epilogue
death.
is there where he's alive. Okay, I thought this was another discrepancy between the two for a second.
And this is a classic. This is kind of an anti-hero thing, which I think is kind of cool for his character in a way. He was evolving. He became this good guy. He started helping the rebels. He was enjoying flying with Rogue Squadron, all this stuff. And the very end, he's like, no. I got to fake my own death. Let's not make them think I'm dead, and I'm just out of this conflict forever. And they make it seem like Dash and his co-pilot, we haven't mentioned yet, Lebo, who to me, every time I saw Solo with what's her
L3.
name? L3. Sorry, my mind blank.
Yeah,
I thought Lebo. They're similar. So, and the fact that they're the co-pilots of YTs, interesting stuff like that. So Dash fakes his own death to escape this rebellion Empire conflict. But then we end the book actually with Luke on Tatooine recording his message onto R2's hologram recorder, the message to Almighty Jabba.
and that's the lead in to Return of the Jedi.
Yep. And he basically tells R2, you know the plan. Don't tell 3PO the plan.
Which is perfect.
It's so perfect because when 3PO gets there, he's like, wait, what? You're giving us to Jabba and all this good stuff. So, and Luke has some reflective moments about Dash's death. He feels bad about that. He is determined to get Han back, and he is determined to protect Leia. They mention all that towards the end, and he basically has a sort of little inner thoughts about Ben and being in Ben's home and all that sort of stuff. Reflection.
So let's just take a couple minutes to sort of wrap up the story of Shadows of the Empire. Just maybe some points we didn't hit when we were kind of going through the plot there. I respect the ambition of Shadows of the Empire. The novel, the book, the video game. Essentially, soundtrack. Essentially everything you release for a movie, except no movie actually got made. This was, there to increase the hype for the special editions coming out, which it totally worked on us way back when.
Yeah.
As I talked about in the first couple episodes, the special editions don't hold up so great anymore. But while I respect the ambition of Shadows of the Empire, I don't think it's all that great when you take an adult perspective maybe to it. The comic does not hold up well. The art is rough to bad. The storytelling is not good. There's some good action scenes with the bounty hunters. You're right. They're the main focus of the comic.
Which is odd, but I guess the comic was supposed to be fringe anyways. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be. And we didn't mention this earlier, which is a shame, but the book is written by an author called Steve Perry.
Oh, yeah, we probably should have mentioned his name. Sorry, Steve.
Well, yeah, and this is relevant because at this point, in Star Wars EU, we had very little books. We had the Thrawn trilogy, Splinter in the Mind's Eye, and some of the Han Solo adventures stuff.
The Brian Daly stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that's really it. So this was a huge. Not only was this huge to get people to hype back on Star Wars, and kind of when there was a lull of Star Wars, other than a few books, it was a way to get the entire world back into Star Wars. Before the special editions, then the prequel trilogy, and then now it hasn't stopped till now, essentially. So Shadows of the Empire to me is a very pivotal moment in 1996 when they basically just reignited Star Wars onward to now, and that's Mike. That's a 22-year gap.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm not saying it's not important, but it was ambitious and it faltered in times. We'll talk about the game in detail here in just a minute, but now that we've had plenty more Star Wars stories since then, I don't rank it near the top in, Legends canon or
Do you like the
current.
overall arc of the story though? Like that I like the overall arc of the story. I think I just really like the Vader, Luke, Shizor stuff, and then I enjoy the smuggler stuff where they're basically trying to get Han, but Han's the secondary plot.
I like the bounty hunter stuff, the heist element where they're trying to actually steal Han. I don't feel like Luke grows too much in this. He grows in his
He grows in his
combat.
powers.
His
Yeah.
powers, his combat ability of the Force, because he's got basically he has chances to practice using the Force in combat in Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah, and also in the novel, which at the beginning has a lot of self-doubt and fear and things like that. And by the end of this, in no way is he over those things, but he's dramatically improved. So it's like it's an interesting point. We have Empire Luke, Return of the Jedi Luke, which are different. And this is kind of a midway point between those two.
Right, and it's fine for that, but it focuses mainly on the combat aspect of it. I've talked enough about Shizor. He really brings down this story for me. Looking at it, it's just gross. Like
Just because he creeps you out.
It's just because we were okay with a villain being rapey in a kid's story back then. I don't think that removing Shadows of the Empire from canon had a negative effect on The Last Jedi or current canon, whatever. It is a product of its time that was fun and has a lot going for it. It just falters in places. Really, the last note I have is that Dash is just the epitome of the 90s. You saw this outside of Star Wars, even with comics, the Rob Liefeld era of Marvel Comics and Avengers, the hyper macho masculine, I can do everything, but Dash is never gonna drown because he's always wearing a life vest sort of thing on his shoulders.
Well, it's just odd that he's a more macho Han. Like, and not that Han's super macho or super non-macho. It's obnoxious to me that he's a little bit of that. And Guri's a little bit of a Terminator, and I've got to reference that because Terminator was so fresh and relevant, culturally relevant at this time, the mid 90s and
True.
Early 90s. So, and Guri's basically just a perfected Terminator. So, I don't know. I like the overall story and the ways of they basically fail the whole time.
What's
but
that? You like a story where they fail the whole time?
Yeah, I do.
Hey, look at that.
Empire is my favorite movie. You remember that part? Empire. Yeah, they fail a lot. So, but Luke actually, he progresses. But like you said, he mainly progresses in his powers. But it is cool to see him work through using the Force in an X-wing, talking to Ben briefly, using his first mind trick, deflecting his first bolts, and it's kind of difficult for him, and he's testing it out, and building his first lightsaber. So these are all major Jedi Padawan finisher training sort of things.
That's true. He does get his big boy saber. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
that is a very valid point.
And they call that in literature the master builds his own tools. And that's something that George got from literature and stuff. It's like making your own sword. Your training is almost over. You know what I mean? And that's became an archetype of the Jedi from there on out. So
That's enough of the story of Shadows of the Empire. Let's run over to the Dejarik table real quick and talk about the game in a little bit of detail.
Think. You want to make that move. You want to make that move. You made that move, okay. I guess I'll have to destroy that little guy. Somehow I never get bored with winning. No, you can't wipe them off. They're holograms. Hey, Chewie, relax. Hey.
Here at the Digart table, we're going to spend our time talking about the old Star Wars video games. So many of them produced by LucasArts back in the day, and Shadows of the Empire no exception. First released for the Nintendo 64 in December 1996, and then Windows 95 almost a year later. This was an important game for the Nintendo 64 because it was originally supposed to be a launch title, got pushed back a little bit for some extra polish, but turned out to be the second highest selling game for the 64 in its launch year. Sold 1 million copies that first year. It was the third top selling game for the 64 in 1997. And like, I give Dash a lot of crap in terms of the story, but in terms of being a video game protagonist, it's pretty fun.
Yeah. And I actually enjoyed some of the cutscenes and stuff in the 64 one, like where it's the comic book style. I just thought it was appropriate. But something I'm going to mention too here, Mike, was this was an important moment in Star Wars history because this was the first major wide-scale release of a Star Wars game on a console. And it kind of changed Star Wars console gaming forever.
That's true. As with many first or third person games on the Nintendo 64, it had some wonky controls to go with it.
Oh, man. Yeah, basically, if you wanted to aim at anything, you had to stand still. And when you stood still, the probe droids and stormtroopers shot you.
It's like they knew that. Yeah, he's just gonna stand there. It's fine. The part of this game that people remember most, I think, is the first level, the Battle of Hoth, that Dash is participating in.
Oh man, this is huge for Star Wars gaming.
Yeah. I mean, that level's been done to death in so many different games, but this one was the first full 3D version of it. Did it pretty well. It was still hard to, secure the tow cable around the Imperial walkers. But there's also some deep cuts in the part where Dash returns to Echo Base and is going back through trying to get to the Outrider.
Oh yeah,
I mentioned I mentioned the deleted scenes for Empire in our last episode. The original intent to have the Wampas invading the base at the same time as the Imperial invasion. Well, we actually sort of see that happening here in this game because it feels like a Wampa in every other room that Dash visits in Echo Base.
Yeah, there's a total of 8 in Echo Base. I looked this up because I was curious. And there is one more Wampa in the game, and that's that sand Wampa on the 3rd level.
Copy paste and make him match the sand instead of the snow.
Yeah, rocky sand mountainous Wampa. What I'm going to mention too, Mike, about the Battle of Hoth, I think that was basically a huge turning point for Star Wars because the Battle of Hoth had only been done in the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy renditions of this before.
It had been in the Atari version too, I believe.
Yeah, that too. And they just was not the same. And this kind of changed the game forever. And this first mission and the last mission are always, in my experience, cited as the best missions. The Skyhook, where you get to actually fully control the Outrider, and the Snowspeeder at the beginning are cited as the best because they were the smoothest in controls. And without these, we wouldn't have Rogue Squadron.
That's right. Rogue Squadron came out 2 years later in 1998, which
basically emulated that first level.
Emulated, but improved on. The controls were smoother, and yeah. Like I said earlier, I think the first handful of levels in this game are probably the most memorable for me.
Yeah.
The middle sort of drags a little bit, and you're right. The Skyhook confrontation at the end was fun, but there's a lot of good videos out on YouTube of people speed running this on different difficulties. It's pretty entertaining.
Subsequently, that Hoth level now is a staple of every Star Wars game ever, including almost every arcade game that came out after that point too. It just was so iconic and fun that they just had to keep making it over and over again.
Yeah, so if you have not had a chance to play Shadows of the Empire, a re-release for PC is available, I believe, through Good Old Games, GOG. Right. I can't speak to the controls on the PC because I haven't played that version, but it's got to be better than the Nintendo 64 controller.
All I remember about the PC version is for some reason those comic book cutscenes they redid with bad CG.
Yeah.
And we got some uncanny valley like Luke smiling and stuff. So That's become some unfortunate pictures for memes and things like that. That's the only thing I really know of the PC version.
You got any other thoughts about the video game Shadows of the Empire?
I mean, I was already a huge fan of IG8 after I saw Empire Strikes Back. Just me personally, I know there was some weird thing that swept through culture in the 80s and 90s, which was just everyone saying you have to love IG8. You just have to as a Star Wars fan. I know there was an element of that, but I just always loved him since the first moment I saw him on screen. And you fight him on Ord Mantell, is that correct?
Yeah.
In a boss fight after the train sequence, and it is a very frustrating boss fight because he is overpowered and the controls are bad. So,
Yeah, and if you don't find those seeker missiles, you're boned.
yeah. And it turns out you're fighting IG8 on Ord Mantell. So guess what? He just blends in. So
Super hard to see.
those low res graphics.
He jumps everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, he uses different weapons, all of his different guns, rapid fire, long shots, and you fight him. And something that wasn't in the book at all. So it's another way they're fleshing out Dash's story, what he's doing, while the other characters are doing other things.
That's right. So shifting away from the Nintendo 64 video game, but sticking with Dash, Jesse and I both have experience with Star Wars tabletop gaming. We've actually even had podcasts previous to this where we talked about it.
Right.
One of the most popular miniatures games is the Star Wars X-Wing game, where you fly iconic ships and pilots and plastic models across your kitchen table, and you say pew pew, and it's fun. But Dash is also a problem in that game. He's one of the more overpowered characters, given a high pilot skill and strong abilities for no good reason, just kind of like how he existed in the story of Shadows of the Empire as well.
Yeah, but his ship looks beautiful on the table. The Outrider looks good.
Oh yeah, no, ship looks good. It's definitely 1100 greater than the Millennium Falcon.
And I've got to get a shout out for Guri because I like playing her.
Oh, that's true. The Star Vipers are also in the miniatures game, and it's a really cool ship.
So right, this is a good example, Mike, of things we're going to talk about in the future, which is where culture and old things proceed despite canon changing and preference and things like that changing. This is a modern tabletop game that has all the ships from Shadows of the Empire in it.
That's right. But if there's a company that can make money off your Star Wars nostalgia, they're gonna do it.
Right. And all the characters are there. Shizor, Guri, Dash, and even Dash's co-pilot, the aforementioned droid we mentioned earlier, Lebo, is in it.
All right, let's transition to segments here. So I don't know if we should call this next segment News from the HoloNet. I know we're not super timely with it, or our segment We Don't Serve Your Kind here, where we call out the bad actions in Star Wars fandom. It's kind of both. But
I would say more the latter.
Yeah. It's news, but it's news because of bad actions. So we're recording this. What day is it? It's July something. Yeah. It's July 12th. About a week ago, the story came out that Ahmed Best, the actor who provided the voice and motion capture for Jar Jar Binks in the prequel trilogy, he almost committed suicide by jumping off of a bridge after the media and fan backlash following the release of Episode 1. And it's 19 years to the day is when he made this story public.
It's unbelievable. And this is kind of case in point, Mike, why we're doing this show. This is the sort of stuff we're talking about. There's so many Star Wars movies, there's so many Star Wars characters, and there's things you're going to love and not love. And some people love Jar Jar. Children love Jar Jar especially. And some people hate Jar Jar more than anything in the entire world. No, but the fact that this bridged the gap into real life and affected someone's mental health and their mental stability, that hits really hard on me. And I had a really hard time hearing that.
No, and I've been all over the map on Jar Jar because we were the right age when the prequels came out, and I thought he was funny then. It was like, hey, it's the new Star Wars alien, neat. And as I watched the prequels when I got older, I realized that the character's not that great to bad, and you can sort of blame the rise of the Empire on him if you're going to stick to story. But at no point did I ever think that the person who provided the voice and motion for this character needs to be harassed by media or fans. I know that Andy Serkis deservedly gets a lot of recognition for
Hmm.
his work in motion capture, but uh,
Right.
ILM, Lucasfilm, Ahmed, George, this was the first fully CG mocap character in a movie.
Right.
And if
Especially a
George
movie
had
like this.
said, I saw an interview with George a couple years ago where he said his original vision for Jar Jar was Goofy, the Disney Mickey character, but in Star Wars. That makes a lot of sense. You can see a lot of the similar traits in them. You can argue about whether that fits in Star Wars or not, but the character was there to be goofy for the kids.
Definitely. The fact that this has bridged the gap to real life, like we're talking about, it breaks my heart. And I've actually seen a couple of interviews with him, and I really like Ahmed Best a lot. He has a great sense of humor. He just seems like an awesome guy to sit down and have a beer with.
Yeah, he's a
So
cool dude on Twitter, and he's not run from Star Wars.
no,
He provided Jar Jar's voice on the Clone Wars, and you know he had this one bad experience, but he seems to have rebounded okay. You can't say the same thing for the other victim of terrible fan abuse in the prequels, Jake Lloyd.
I don't know, man. It's just these are great examples of the fandom tearing itself apart, some cannibalism going on, some internet mentality, some mob mentality. Because then, Mike, this to me leads my sadness for George. And basically, when he was starting to get done with Star Wars, he basically said, "It's not fun anymore." And
Why
when
would I
people
make
don't like,
Star Wars when half the people hate him
yes, exactly,
and hate me for it?
right,
Yeah. Well, and the reason I bring this up, um, well, obviously it's news, but the connection to modern Star Wars films is the harassment that some of the new actors have received for their performances in The Last Jedi or beyond. Specifically, Kelly Marie Tran, who plays Rose in Episode 8,
right,
chose to delete her social media after the just sexist and racist and horrible just shit that people
internet
say to her.
trolls,
And they're
garbage.
the same people who would have said these things to Ahmed Best to his face, because we didn't have social media back in 1999. I've seen online some of these people who hold these views and do these things. They've embraced the title of the fandom, FANDOM menace. Like they think they're doing something positive for fandom. And
Wow.
if you feel that you're entitled as a air quotes customer of Lucasfilm to harass and berate actors because you didn't like a movie, we don't need you in Star Wars fandom, and it's time to
Yeah.
leave. Like,
Yeah.
move on.
And it's what I say a lot, Mike, is like Star Wars is so vast and wide. I don't understand how someone can say something like, Palpatine's my character, and someone also says, well, I really like C-3PO. And a child says, I love Jar Jar Binks. It doesn't Star Wars is great because of that. There's so many character types, there's so many races, there's so many robots, droids. The list goes on. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah. And just to sort of wrap this up on something that I feel is more positive, just to, shove it back at this fandom menace. I saw this on Twitter and I retweeted it today from Rebecca Polly. Rose Tico is a better character than Boba Fett ever has been, and that's the damn truth. And
On
she got
film,
more in film. She's gotten way more characterization, and she's a better character than a cool suit of armor that walks around and looks at the camera sometimes. So I'm happy that Rose is going to be back in Star Wars Episode 9. Screw the haters. We don't need these people.
And you love
We don't
Boba
serve your kind here.
There it is. And you love Boba Fett.
Yeah, I think Boba Fett's awesome. But if you're looking at the film universe, yeah, he's bad. He's a cool suit of armor. He's not a character.
Let's move on from Jar Jar. I'm sure we'll return to him. I hope we see more of Ahmed Best in the future, and hope we hear more from the guy because he's great. And let's also mention, Mike, that man was in a full rubber suit in Tunisia.
Yeah. Poor
And
guy.
they actually used a lot of I don't know if a lot of people know this, but for a lot of the shots in Phantom Menace, I say a few shots of Jar Jar, they used him in the suit.
Yeah.
His hand,
Oh,
his
that's
actual,
right.
his physical hands and feet. I believe his feet in most shots were his actual feet, the Chewbacca type thing. So it's just the man is there. You know, he's there with Liam Neeson doing it. So I don't know. So, but we don't serve your kind here.
Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of the Canon Cantina, where we took our deep dive into the very ambitious project Shadows of the Empire. We hope you enjoyed it. Find us on Facebook. We've got a Facebook page there, Canon Cantina. You can find us on Twitter at The Canon Cantina. Make sure you put the on there. I put the cart before the horse in our first 2 episodes and didn't get our Twitter name right. It is The Canon Cantina. Or you could send us an email to canoncantina@gmail.com if you agreed with what we said, if you disagreed, if we were wrong about something, if we missed something, or you just want to share your thoughts on, Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. So if you guys have any things that you guys really enjoyed about Shadows of the Empire, things you didn't like, characters you liked, I'm looking at you, Shizor. I'm not looking at you, Dash. Mike said it's here. So just random things you enjoyed. I personally enjoyed the cover with Luke fighting the Barabels, things like that resonate with me on a certain level of 20 years ago me. Tweet that stuff at us, and also we'll have discussion on our Facebook page about this. One of the biggest things we want to do on our show is have a lot of good discussion. We hope that these summaries and these discussions open more discussion about these characters in these time periods.
That's right. We're just, we're just 2 dudes with our own 2 opinions. We want to hear what you have to say about how Star Wars affected you growing up. So send us on our Facebook page or through Twitter, or through email. Send us your thoughts, and we'll share a lot of it on the show.
Yes, indeed. And please join us next week at probably one of the most exciting elements of Luke's character, Return of the Jedi. Huge movie for Luke, especially the finale, the 3rd act. We see some of the most defining elements of Luke's character, and we're going to dive deep into that next week. So if you guys want to join us, something I don't know if we mentioned in past episodes, but if you could watch Return of the Jedi before next week, you can be there right with us as we sit down and go through the entire film and Luke's arc in this film.
That's right. Thanks for joining us in the Canon Cantina today. We hope to see you again next week. Cheers, everybody.
May the Force be with you. Cheers.
Boring conversation anyway.